Graham was happy to pick up.
I believe this is the beginning of the Democrats coming together. There is a recognition that this election we've all got to be supportive of one another so that when November 6th comes around, we're celebrating a victory for the state of Florida and a victory for the people of Florida.
Joining me this morning to discuss this decision is Patrick Murphy. Congressman, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So, welcome back to the show. So, let's take a step back before we talk about your endorsement of Gwen Graham. You considered and gave serious thought to the idea of running for governor. What made you do that, and what were the issues that were driving you in that decision?
Well, it really started probably about a year ago. After working with David Jolly in Congress on quite a few issues, we did a joint interview after we both lost our last election, and we're talking about what is wrong with Washington, D.C. And sort of off the cuff, we gave this description of, to me, the 7 problems facing us that have led to this division: the money, the gerrymandering, the polarized media, the lack of relationships, you know, all these issues. He gave his issues, and it kind of caught on. So we've been to, I think, 10, 15 different events now talking about what's wrong with politics. How do we get to this place? And over the last several months, quite a few people started reaching out to us saying, hey, guys, this is the answer. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat, you're getting along, you agree on more than you disagree on. Man, this is what's missing, is this middle lane in politics right now. Why don't you all consider running? And we kind of laughed it off in the beginning and then started really thinking about it. And it was never, of course, personal to any of the candidates in the race. It was always about, quite frankly, doing something bigger than either one of us and saying, let's fix this broken system. No one is getting along right now, and it's getting worse and worse. So we gave it some real thought. You
did some polling. I know there was some polling, and the numbers, from what I understand, what I've heard, there was a path. There was a path there. So people wanted the idea of a bipartisan nature of rule in Tallahassee. So why not go forward with it?
You're right. I mean, the polling was there. We had good financial commitments. We had all sorts of volunteers, and we had all sorts of people reaching out with the support. But ultimately, to do something like this, it's got to be deep inside. And I started almost in a position of people trying to convince me to do this, and it was tough for me to kind of get over that hump to say, this is what I really want deep inside, because I know how nasty, you know, these things can get. And I decided after, you know, probably a month of really thinking about it, that it wasn't the right time. Combination of factors kind of led to that decision, but just didn't have that inside feeling. And I think Gwen Graham's going to be a great candidate, and beyond that, a great governor. I think she's got a proven track record of getting things done, of being a leader, solving problems. We agree on a lot more issues than we disagree on, and she's obviously got the family history.
I just want to stick with the idea of combining with Jolly and whether or not you could have made it through a primary. I know the polling that you did looked good, but people were telling me, critics of the idea of you guys pairing together, was that once people started running ads against you that would say your first decision as a Democratic candidate for governor was to pick a pro-life Republican and drive home that part of it, you know, that would have scuttled it in a large way. Does the fact that we end up using labels like he's a pro-life Republican, you know, you're a anti, you know, whatever the numbers, whatever the labels are, is that part of the problem that you see?
Absolutely, and that's why doing something like this is so difficult, especially doing it so late in the game, because you're going to need the resources ultimately to get your message out and make sure people understand what you really believe in. You know, David Jolly says he's a conservative, but this day and age, you know, he's somebody that I think most Democrats would appreciate. You know, he's someone that really wants to do something with weapons in our streets. You know, he wants to rein in the violence. He wants to make sure that Medicaid is out there for everybody. He believes in climate change. I mean, there's a lot of things that we actually agree on, and the thought was, there are some things we disagree on. We understand that. But if we can find some common ground on some major issues, then we might actually find some legislation that lasts. Because what you see happening is, you know, President Obama gets Obamacare done and passed. The next administration comes in and throws it out. Whatever President Trump does now, the next Democratic administration is going to throw that out. Let's get some lasting legislation. And we thought this would be the way to do it.
Some of the polling that has come out, some of the independent polling, has former Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine well ahead at this point in the race. He spent a lot of money. Gwen Graham is considerably far behind him at this point in second place. Andrew Gillum, Chris King, Jeff Green, they're much further down on the list. Why isn't Gwen Graham, with her background, which is similar to yours, with her family history, why do you think she's not catching on more?
Well, let me just say, I don't think anybody's truly caught on. In large part, I don't blame the candidates because of Donald Trump. Right? The man in the White House is continuing to get pressed day after day because of all the controversy. So Philip Levine's name ID has gotten higher because of the money he spent. I wouldn't say he's catching fire, but I believe Gwen Graham has the resources. I know she's just starting to do her advertising, and there will be some differences in the two, candidates and the others as they start to spend money. That voters are just now starting to wake up. We've seen poll after poll, I think, showing about 50% of voters are undecided. They don't even know who's running right now. They're just starting to pay attention.
Well,
so,
what do you see as the sharp differences between Gwen and Philip Levine? What made you decide to support Gwen as opposed to staying neutral or backing Levine?
The Grahams have been family friends for decades. That matters. I got to serve in Congress with Gwen Graham, and we got to work on legislation together. I've seen her reach across the aisle and solve problems and stick to her guns and what she believes in. Right? She represented a very difficult district in the Panhandle and grew up understanding, I think, the value of public service. That means a lot to me. I believe she's a good person. That also matters to me. And I think when you get down to the issues with the 5 candidates in this race right now, I think they are going to agree on a lot more than they disagree on. It's how they actually solve that problem and get across the finish line that's going to matter, and I think she's best suited to do that.
I'm going to keep trying to draw you into saying something about Levine as to what it is that doesn't attract you to him.
Look, I've gotten to know most of the candidates in the race, and Mayor Gillum, for example, was one of the first mayors to endorse me in my Senate race. Philip Levine, I got to know in Miami, and Chris King, I don't know if I've actually ever met him, but I hear really good things about him. So there was nothing personal in that decision. It was my friendship with Gwen, my loyalty. Her dad was out there on primary day and on election day campaigning, holding up signs with me. Right? I mean, he took the time. They were there for me, and consider him a mentor.
Do you think Gwen Graham is a better general election candidate than Levine?
I do. I do. I think she would do a great job as governor. Ultimately, to me, that's what matters, but you got to win it first. And I think she would be the better candidate.
Do you think Levine would have a much harder time? Can you tell me why you think Levine would have a harder time?
Just traveling the state. I've been doing this series of town halls I mentioned earlier with David Jolly, not thinking about running at all, just talking politics with people and what's wrong. And unsolicited, the reaction I get about the 4, now 5 candidates, Gwen seems to resonate more, at least in conversation. I know she hasn't, broken through entirely, but in conversation, a lot of people are attracted to her type of politics, especially when you get north of the Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach area.
Yet, the key to winning a primary is south of that area. Right. It's Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties. That's the Democratic stronghold, and that's where Philip Levine seems to be doing really well, and where Gwen Graham is somewhat behind, in part because maybe she's perceived as being a little bit too moderate or too conservative among Democrats.
I think that's some of it, but I'll tell you, just in the last month after considering running for governor myself, so much of this has to do with name ID. People just aren't studying this like you and I might be, and I think when she gets her message out, when they start to hear about her, who she is, that she is actually a candidate, I think her poll numbers and all this is going to change dramatically. But I don't trust polls anymore anyway. So
what's your take? What's your take on how Congress is dealing with things these days? You left a couple of years ago, but you're watching it, I'm sure. So what's going on in Congress from your perspective?
It's heartbreaking. The Congress for years now, decades, has continued to give more and more authority over to the administration. And my friends on the other side of the aisle, I don't want to bash them, but they tell me off the record how much they hate this president. They tell me how disappointed they are in what's happening with trade, what's happening with so many issues, immigration, etc. Yet they go on TV and, don't say a word. That, to me, isn't leadership. I wish they would stand up and do what they believe. Integrity matters. Getting things done matters. And it's frustrating to watch so many people not have that courage to stand up for what they believe in.
Where do you think that comes from? Where's that fear? Why are they afraid?
There's this funny saying in Congress that your #1 job is to get reelected. So people are able to justify, hey, I'd like to stand up against them, but if I do, I might get primaried, I might lose, and then I couldn't be in this position. So people have these funny way of justifying a political system instead of what they really believe.
Patrick Murphy, thank you very much for coming in. Yes or no question, you going to run for office again someday?
I'd be surprised if I didn't, but I have no idea what it's going to be.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in. All right, up next, we continue to talk politics with the prolific Mark Caputo from Politico.
Tonight.
welcome back. There's a lot going on in politics in Florida, and I can't think of anyone better to stumble through the campaign weeds with than Mark Caputo with Politico. Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
You know, it's always a pleasure to just sort of talk politics in general. So let's start with the governor's race. We just had Patrick Murphy on the show. He decided not to run for governor through his support to Gwen Graham. Does it make much of a difference?
Well, it makes a difference because Gwen Graham got great press over it. And donors right now are in that stage of deciding, okay, who's the hot candidate to bet on? And Graham has not been faring so well because Phil Levine, the former Miami Beach mayor, is really steaming ahead. And at this point, Graham's campaign needed a bit of a boost, and she got two on Thursday. She got Patrick Murphy deciding not only he's not going to run for governor, but he's going to endorse her. And she also got the Florida Education Association, the teachers union, to endorse her as well.
Which is actually more powerful. The teachers union endorsement, that actually comes with resources and money behind it, doesn't it?
That can. I think it's an open question to see whether or not the Florida Education Association will play in a Democratic primary. I don't think that they will, but they still could.
The Jeff Green's entry into the race.
Or whatever you would call it.
Well, I'll share this. I spoke to Jeff Green. Mm-hmm. You know, I called him up and I just sort of said, you know, because I like to talk to billionaires every once in a while. And I was like, what's going on? I invited him to come on the show. And he said, we're still in the exploratory phase. So I don't know what that means exactly, but when a billionaire says he's in an exploratory phase, it sounds like he just wants to spend some money.
I guess. I mean, he's got time. And he's got money, and so he can spend the money and the time. But you really wonder how serious the guy is. So I've spoken to a few consultants who have either spoken to him or spoken to consultants who have spoken to him, and they get the general feeling that A, he's not a pleasant person to work for, and B, he thinks he can buy the election, and C, they all think he's wrong. Now, one of the reasons he might be in the exploratory phase, Jeff Green, is that there might not be any consultants right now who are going to work for him.
Well, he told me right now he hasn't hired anyone. Could that be because he hasn't picked anyone, or nobody has said yes to him?
It could perhaps be both. You know, generally when a billionaire says, like, hey, I spent $24 million in 2010, now I'm going to run again for office.
Right, he ran for Senate in 2010.
Right.
And there's some baggage from that, too. He certainly angered the African-American community. He was seen as sort of a spoiler for Kendrick Meek.
I guess to a degree, but usually when a guy like that comes along, that's like, you know, the honeybees have announced to the bears that, hey, there's a whole big pot of honey here. For some reason, though, none of the consultants are going to buy it.
Which is sort of what my theory has been Chris King's race the entire time. I think there were a lot of Hillary people who were in Florida who thought they were going to go work in the White House, who suddenly didn't have jobs and thought to themselves, well, maybe we'll latch on to this kid and have him spend a lot of money on a governor's race, and that hasn't been going very well.
So far it hasn't been going well according to the polling. I mean, we released a poll on Friday showing that Levine is polling 32% in the primary, and the number 2 candidate, Gwen Graham, is at 16%. Andrew Gillum's at 11%, Chris King's at 6%, Jeff Green is at 4%.
Did the Grahams overestimate the name value? I mean, Bob Graham was a popular governor, popular senator, but a lot of people have moved in and out of Florida since Bob Graham was in office.
I think Gwen Graham has a smart campaign team, and they never thought this was going to be a coronation. But I think what did catch them by surprise is the fact that Philip Levine came in so strong. He's spent almost $11 million on television, and it's working.
Who does, by the way, just to go back for Jeff Green, does he hurt anyone in the race?
Well, it depends on what he does. You know, if he drops a whole pile of money on Philip Levine, that probably hurts him. But, you know, let's kind of see. It's a bizarre launch for a campaign where a guy really doesn't want to comment on his campaign.
So let's talk about the Republican side, because that's a two-person race. You've got Ron DeSantis and you've got Adam Putnam. And there's some breaking news. We're taping this on Friday, and you were feverishly looking at your phone because there's a story out just now by the Tampa Bay Times, which could be somewhat devastating for Adam Putnam.
Right. Adam Putnam in July called himself a proud NRA sellout. And it turns out that his office, which is in charge of regulating concealed weapons permits, failed to do the required background checks to make sure that people getting concealed weapons permits aren't dangerous people. And this problem persisted for a number.
Don't we take their word for it? I mean,
apparently the honor system doesn't work. Like, pinky swears don't cut it when it comes to concealed weapons permits. And the office is saying, well, look, this we don't really know how this happened, but we fixed it when we found out the problem. The problem is that the problem apparently persisted for up to a year.
So now, is Adam Putnam still considered the favored candidate in this race? I know Ron DeSantis has got the blessing of the White House. He's got the blessing of President Trump. That knocked out Richard Corcoran. You know, how do you size up this race right now?
I would still think that Adam Putnam is the favored because he's got so much more money than Ron DeSantis. He has a little bit more name ID. But Ron DeSantis is essentially the candidate from Fox News. You can't really turn on Fox News for an entire day without seeing him on there. A really high percentage of pattern primary Republican voters watch Fox News. And again, Ron DeSantis has the endorsement of President Trump, and that makes a difference.
The last time I saw Ron DeSantis, I spoke to him. He agreed to come on this show. We're still waiting for him to walk through the door. I'll take that he's good for his word. Let's go to the Senate race. Bill Nelson, Rick Scott. You know, Rick Scott, for no matter, even though given the mood of the year and the feeling that it might be an anti-Trump sort of wave election, Rick Scott's out there. He's hustling. He's punching. He's doing what he needs to do. And I keep wondering, where's Bill Nelson?
Well, a lot of Democrats are also wondering where Bill Nelson is as well. And, you know, it comes as no surprise to anyone who's watched Rick Scott's career that when he decides to do something, especially a campaign, he goes in whole hog. And boy, he has. I think he's already dropped about $13 million on television between him, his super PAC, and some of his allies. And it's a multidimensional campaign. He's campaigning in English and in Spanish. He's in the Puerto Rican community. Like, this is generally, the Puerto Rican community, a bastion for Democratic votes, or at least Democrats view it that way. And Rick Scott right now is playing on Bill Nelson's half of the field. Using
his power as governor. Suddenly, we're donating a whole, like almost 24 Florida Highway Patrol vehicles to Puerto Rico. That gets good press in Puerto Rico. That translates to good press in the Orlando area for him as well.
Right. One thing we should note is that President Trump's approval rating among a lot of Puerto Ricans is abysmal. I mean, it's horrendous.
And it's one of the few areas where Governor Scott has broken with the president in saying he doesn't think he did necessarily a very good job.
Well, I don't think he's been that clear about it. And when asked if he would have done anything differently when he was in Puerto Rico on a 6th visit, Governor Scott was unable to answer the question. He said he didn't know.
I want to turn to what's going on in the congressional races. Is Donna Shalala just a runaway train at this point? Will she be the Democratic nominee? Can David Richardson or any of the other candidates really stop that from happening?
You know, I've made enough wrong predictions to know that I'm not going to predict a winner this many months out. But it's safe to say that Donna Shalala, she's got like a double-digit lead in almost every poll that's been taken of the race. She's really difficult to beat. I mean, she's not only well known in the Clinton world, but she was the University of Miami president, and this district that she's in, the 27th, encompasses the University of Miami.
I wonder when Bill Clinton steps in it again, as he did this past week, with regard to Monica Lewinsky and that agitated interview, does it just not make a lot of people go ick and enough with the Clintons, and does Shalala fall under that bandwagon as well, or is that district so pro-Clinton that they don't really see it that way?
I mean, Hillary Clinton won that district by about 20 points, so it's difficult to see Clinton being that deadly of a name or that bad of a brand. You also have to remember that Hillary Clinton won that district, and Donna Shalala can certainly lay claim to being part of the broader Clinton world, not just a sock puppet for Bill Clinton.
We've got a minute left. Somebody else who's running a very smart race, although there may be a little cynicism here too, Carlos Curbelo. He's moving. You say you can't open up Fox without seeing DeSantis. I can't go on MSNBC or CNN without seeing Carlos Curbelo talking about the immigration and trying to get the DACA thing to the floor of the House. This is never going to make it to the president's desk, but it's good politics for Carlos Curbelo.
Right, and I also think that in Curbelo's case, he's actually serious about doing it. But, for years he was part of that Republican contingent who kept denying that Republicans were the stumbling block for immigration reform. Newsflash, they are. He can't even get 25 Republicans to sign on to a discharge petition, a procedural motion to just get an immigration vote on the floor.
I remember he said, I'm for Paul Ryan now, tomorrow, in 2020. He was all in for Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan turned out to be his stumbling block. Does he regret that support of Paul Ryan?
That's a good question. I mean, Paul Ryan just has congenitally not told the truth in his entire career. He didn't want to be the House Speaker. Now he's the House Speaker. He's the budget hawk. Now we have record deficits. He was going to do something with immigration reform. He won't even allow a discharge petition to bring something to the floor. Paul Ryan doesn't tell the truth.
All right, Mark Caputo, it always goes quick whenever I have you in the studio. Thank you very much. Okay, up next, the dulcet tones of US 1 Radio's Bill Becker when we come back.
Well, you're
10 days into hurricane season, and so far so good. Well, we did have Alberto, but that really doesn't count. But one of the lessons from last season was how easily a storm can throw us all into an information black hole. For instance, when the leading edge of Hurricane Irma struck the Florida Keys, it almost immediately knocked out power, leaving residents from Key West to Key Largo without cell phones, internet service, or television. But luckily for them, there was a voice in the darkness.
It is 1:33 in the morning on a Sunday morning here. Bill Becker and Ron Saunders coming to you live from our studios on Upper Sugarloaf Key.
The only way people knew they weren't alone was the sound of Bill Becker's voice on US 1 Radio.
Reporting live here from our studios,
providing them a calm but candid assessment of what they should expect as the worst of the winds approached.
That's the stark reality of what we're facing here right now.
People who had battery-powered radios said they slept with their radio. They hunkered down with their radio to listen to us, to just hear somebody in the darkness. This was the only means of communication for everybody. We were basically back to the Stone Ages of communications. There was nothing else except this radio station. It was pretty incredible.
Becker shot this video from the station's window during the storm. And in the morning, when the eye of the hurricane passed right over the radio station,
well, here we are, the eye of the storm.
Becker took a quick break to go outside and see for himself.
Boy, this is amazing. We have incredible destruction all around here, but we're still looking at the backside of the storm coming at us, so we'll do our best to stay on the air here in US 1 Radio.
40 minutes in the eye of the hurricane. And some people said they thought the storm was over and were going to go out till they heard us tell them, this is the eye of the hurricane, don't go out in it.
That warning likely saved lives. For Becker, who has been the news director since 1980, this was the worst storm he has ever encountered. He said he felt a duty to stay on the air because he knew people would be counting on him. And that was even more the case once the storm cleared.
We're here in the studio. If you want to come by, tell us your story, tell us your need.
We had people lining up at outside our studio here to get on the air with us to relay messages to their loved ones, find out where people were, find out what services were available.
My name is Sean. We rode out the storm in Big Torch there, and water was coming pouring through the windows. I thought the house was going to come off the stilts. We were praying, and we just thank God that it didn't.
Local officials came by as well, providing updates on what was happening. And when the station's generator ran low on gas, Becker put out a distress call for help.
We had people siphoning the gasoline from their boats so they could keep us on the air.
Becker said he is proud of what the station accomplished.
I feel like we did something really special here, being able to stay on the air, and we're going to do it. We're going to harden our system here. We're going to do the best we can to be there next time as well.
And for their incredible work during the storm, Becker and his colleagues at the station recently won the prestigious Murrow Awards. Congratulations to them all. We'll be right back after the break. You can follow me on Twitter @DeFeedy or email me at jdefeedy@cbs.com. Remember to join us next week on Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFeedy. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Watch our news anywhere.